Martha eased herself into her usual chair at the far end of the mahogany dining table, noting how the late afternoon sunlight streamed through the bay windows, casting long shadows across the polished surface. The air was thick with the scent of roasted chicken and rosemary mingling with the practiced joy that so often filled these Sunday family gatherings. She smoothed the napkin across her lap, watching as her grandson Jacob fidgeted with his silverware, while her son James carved the bird with precise, efficient movements. Rebecca, her daughter-in-law, was pouring wine, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she moved around the table. A bracelet Martha had paid for last Christmas, though Rebecca had never acknowledged it as anything but her due. For 15 years since Harold's death, Martha had maintained these Sunday dinners. Even after James and Rebecca had moved into this sprawling suburban home, far grander than the modest split level where Martha had raised her son, she had continued the tradition. The venue had changed, but Martha's role remained the same. The quiet observer, the reliable presence, the open checkbook when finances grew tight. Martha's plate was a landscape of half-eaten food and unspoken thoughts. She nodded and smiled as Rebecca described her latest achievement at the boutique, a small but chic clothing store in an upscale shopping district. "We've just secured an exclusive arrangement with that French designer I was telling you about," Rebecca announced, swirling her wine with practiced elegance. "The markup is incredible. We're talking 350% on some pieces. The clientele won't even blink at those prices." Martha made a mental note of this. The exclusive arrangement had likely been funded by the $8,500 she had transferred to James and Rebecca last month when they claimed the boutique was struggling with supplier payments. 15 years as an accountant for small businesses had taught Martha to recognize the disconnect between boasting and balance sheets. "You should come by the store sometime, Martha," Rebecca continued, though her eyes were fixed on James's sister-in-law across the table, not on Martha herself. "We could find something to update your look." Martha glanced down at her simple blue blouse, practical, comfortable, paid for with her own money. She had learned to live within her means after Harold died, careful with the life insurance and their modest savings. Unlike her son and his wife, who seemed to view fiscal responsibility as a character flaw rather than a virtue. "So, Martha," Rebecca's voice sliced through her thoughts smooth as the wine she swirled in her glass. "How does it feel being useless?" The word hung in the air, a deliberate, cruel ornament. Rebecca smiled then, a wide, bright smile that sought and found its intended audience. James let out a low chuckle. His sister-in-law gave a startled little laugh before her eyes darted guiltily toward Martha. Even Jacob, her 12-year-old grandson, offered a fleeting smirk before looking away. For a long moment, Martha said nothing. The world seemed to slow down, the sounds of the room fading into a distant buzz. She carefully placed her water glass back on the table, her hand steady, a small island of calm in a sudden storm. She looked at Rebecca, truly looked at her perhaps for the first time that day. She wore expensive sunglasses perched on her head like a tiara, and a linen blouse Martha recognized from their shopping trip 3 months ago. Martha had paid for it, of course, a silent gift Rebecca had accepted as her due. Martha straightened her spine, a small internal shift that no one else would have noticed. And when she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost a whisper in the sudden hush. "How does it feel?" She repeated the question, letting it settle between them. Then, with a calm she didn't know she possessed, she added, "Knowing this useless one won't be paying your bills anymore." The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if all the air had been vacuumed from the room. Rebecca's perfect smile faltered, her eyes blinking in disbelief. James's fork, laden with mashed potatoes, froze halfway to his mouth. This time no one laughed. Martha's words, though spoken softly, had the weight of years behind them. She didn't need to raise her voice. The truth was loud enough. Slowly, deliberately, she pushed her chair back, the sound of its legs scraping against the hardwood floor, a final definitive note. She took her purse from the back of the chair, gave a single encompassing nod to the stunned faces around the table, and walked through the patio doors into the afternoon sun. As she stepped outside, the light felt like a warm embrace, a welcome from an old friend. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she breathed out a long, slow exhale of burdens she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Behind her, the family she had held together for so long was suspended in a moment of stunned silence. But for Martha, something had finally irrevocably unlocked, and she knew exactly where she was going. Her quiet house, her little office, and a locked drawer that held the story of her silence were all waiting for her. It's funny how the biggest changes in our lives often start with the smallest of things, isn't it? For Martha, it began with a late mortgage payment. She remembered the phone call as if it were yesterday. James's voice was low, laced with an embarrassment that was almost palpable through the receiver. Rebecca had overspent again. The boutique she was so proud of wasn't doing as well as they had hoped. They were falling behind, and the bank was starting to send those letters, the kind with the bold, urgent print that makes your heart sink. Without a moment's hesitation, Martha had wired them the money that very night. 4,200. She didn't ask any questions, and she certainly didn't pass any judgment. In her heart, she was just helping them catch their breath. We all stumble sometimes, don't we? We all need a little grace. They never mentioned it again. There was no thank you, no acknowledgement of the weight she had lifted from their shoulders. But a month later, there was something else. The rent on the boutique space had gone up. Then it was a credit card bill that Rebecca had, in her words, completely forgotten about, while planning a lavish birthday party for a friend. Then came the deposit for Jacob's private school, a sum that was of course due immediately. Each request was delivered with a quiet urgency, a silent expectation that she would as always make it right. Martha started keeping a record. At first it was just a habit, the accountant in her finding comfort in order and numbers. She opened a spreadsheet in QuickBooks, hidden away in a password-protected folder. She logged the dates, the amounts, and the reasons they gave. She even made a column for the receipts she'd requested but never received. The total grew at a pace that surprised even Martha. She never showed it to them, and they never asked. Dependable had become her unspoken title, not Mother or Martha, but the one who quietly kept everything from falling apart. In the beginning, she told herself it was love. Then she reasoned it was her duty as a mother. But after a while, she stopped trying to name it at all. It just was. Martha remembered one evening about a year into this new arrangement, Rebecca had kissed her cheek after a lovely dinner Martha had paid for. "I don't know what we'd do without you," she'd whispered. Her words meant not as a compliment, but as a quiet, chilling reminder of Martha's role. It was after that night that Martha started printing everything out, the bank statements, the wire transfer confirmations, every piece of paper that told the story of her silent contributions. Now, standing in the comforting quiet of her own home, she walked into her office. The bottom drawer of her filing cabinet opened with a familiar groan, and she pulled out the folder. The papers inside felt heavy, not just with their physical weight, but with the weight of all the things left unsaid. For years, Martha had dreamed of a small cabin near Lake Harmony. She used to drive by it on weekends. A charming little place with white shutters and a screened-in porch nestled among a grove of pine trees. It wasn't anything grand, just a little slice of peace, a place where she could wake up to the sound of birds and sip her coffee by the water. She had been saving for it for nearly 5 years. Her own secret dream tucked away like a pressed flower in a book. The down payment was almost ready when Rebecca called with what she called a vision. The boutique, she explained, could expand if Martha helped. She used words like legacy and family investment, words that were designed to tug at a mother's heartstrings. Martha had agreed, of course. She always did. The cabin by the lake would still be there, she reasoned. Dreams can wait. Family cannot. But as she sat now in her quiet home office, surrounded by the evidence of 3 years of financial drain, Martha wondered if she had been wrong all along. Perhaps dreams shouldn't always wait. Perhaps some dreams once deferred slip away entirely. She spread the papers across her desk, the numbers telling a story that her words never could. 127 in those 450 dies. That was the total. Enough for the cabin, and then some. Enough to have created a life of her own instead of bankrolling someone else's. The realization didn't come with anger, surprisingly. It came with clarity, like finally adjusting a pair of glasses to the right prescription and seeing the world in sharp focus for the first time. Martha had always been careful with money, a habit born of necessity rather than nature. Harold had been the breadwinner in the early years of their marriage, his job at the insurance company providing a comfortable if modest life. But Martha had returned to school when James was 10, earning her accounting degree at night, while working part-time during the day. By the time Harold died of a heart attack at 58, Martha was established in her career, working for a small but respected accounting firm that specialized in helping local businesses. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent decades helping business owners understand their finances, create budgets, plan for growth and hardship alike. Yet somehow she had failed to apply those same principles to her relationship with her son and daughter-in-law. Love, it seemed, had a way of blurring even the sharpest accountant's vision. Martha made herself a cup of tea, the familiar ritual soothing her as she continued to page through the documents. There was the $12,000 for the emergency inventory purchase last summer, and the $18,500 for the boutique renovation that Rebecca had insisted would elevate the brand. Then the $7,800 for the marketing consultant who was supposed to increase their social media presence. On and on it went, a litany of expenses that Martha had shouldered without question or complaint. But it wasn't just the boutique. There were personal expenses too. James's car repair, Rebecca's dental work, Jacob's summer camp. The lines between business and personal had blurred to the point of invisibility. Martha had become not just a business investor, but a personal ATM available at all hours, never charging interest, never asking for repayment. As she sipped her tea, Martha's thoughts drifted to her old friend Carol, a retired attorney who had been Martha's confidant since their children attended the same preschool. Carol had warned her years ago about the pattern she was seeing. "You're not helping them, Martha," she had said over lunch one day. "You're enabling them. There's a difference." Martha had dismissed the concern at the time, defensive of her choices and protective of her relationship with James. But now, sitting amidst the paper trail of her own exploitation, Martha couldn't help but think that Carol had been right all along. She reached for her phone, hesitated for just a moment, and then dialed the familiar number. "I was wondering when you'd call," Carol said by way of greeting, her voice warm and without judgment. "I think I need some legal advice," Martha replied, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Come over for dinner. Bring your papers. We'll figure it out together." Carol's home was a reflection of the woman herself, elegant but practical, beautiful without being showy. The two women sat at Carol's kitchen table, papers spread between them like a complicated map to a destination Martha wasn't sure she wanted to reach. "So they've taken over $100,000 from you," Carol said, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose as she reviewed the documents. "And there was never any formal agreement. No promissory notes, no terms of repayment." Martha shook her head. "It never seemed necessary. They're family." Carol's expression softened. "Family is precisely when these things are necessary, Martha. Love and money make for complicated bedfellows." "I just wanted to help them," Martha said, her voice small. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "The road to bankruptcy is paved with good intentions," Carol replied, not unkindly. "But it's not too late to change course." They talked for hours, Carol's legal mind quickly assessing the situation and presenting Martha with options. None of them were perfect. All of them required Martha to do something she had never done before, stand up for herself against her own family. "You could demand repayment," Carol suggested. "But based on what you've told me, they don't have the means. You could write it off as a loss, but that does nothing to change the pattern. Or Martha prompted when Carol trailed off. "Or you could turn those loans into an investment. A formal legal investment in the boutique. Convert the debt into equity. Become a part owner." Martha blinked, the idea so unexpected that it took a moment to process. "An owner of Rebecca's boutique. It's not just Rebecca's if you've been funding it," Carol pointed out. "And this way you're not asking for money back that they don't have. You're establishing your rightful place in a business you've been bankrolling for years." Martha sat back in her chair, considering the possibility. It was bold, assertive in a way she had never been with her family. It would change everything. "They wouldn't agree to that," she said finally. "Rebecca sees the boutique as her creation, her identity." "They might not have a choice," Carol replied, "especially if the alternative is financial ruin. And Martha," she reached across the table and placed her hand over her friend's, "this isn't just about the money. It's about respect. It's about being seen." Respect. Being seen. The words resonated deep within Martha's chest. How long had it been since she had felt either from her son or his wife? Had they ever truly seen her as more than a safety net, a convenient solution to their financial problems? "I need to think about it," Martha said finally. "Of course you do," Carol agreed. "This isn't a decision to make lightly. But Martha, whatever you decide, remember this. You deserve better than what they've been giving you." Back at home that night, Martha couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with possibilities, with fears, with long-suppressed anger that was finally finding its voice. She got up in the darkness and returned to her office, turning on the small desk lamp that cast a warm, focused glow on her workspace. She reopened the file, but this time she wasn't looking at the numbers. She was looking at the emails, the text messages, the casual, almost careless way James and Rebecca had asked for her financial assistance over the years. There was a pattern to it, The flattery before the ask, the subtle guilt if she hesitated, the quick disappearance after the money was received only to resurface when the next need arose. It was manipulation, she realized, with a clarity that was both painful and liberating. Not calculated, perhaps not malicious in its intent, but manipulation nonetheless. They had learned over time exactly how to extract what they needed from her, playing on her maternal instincts, her desire to be needed, her fear of being alone. Martha opened her laptop and navigated to her online banking portal. With steady hands, she began to move money between accounts, creating a firewall around her remaining assets. She wouldn't drain her accounts, that wasn't her style, but she would protect what she had left. The cabin fund, now significantly depleted, was moved to a separate account, one that would require more than a casual phone call to access. As she worked, a plan began to form in her mind. Not Carol's plan exactly, but something inspired by it. Something that would allow Martha to reclaim not just her financial independence, but her identity as well. Something that would force James and Rebecca to see her, truly see her, perhaps for the first time. She was still at her desk when the first light of dawn began to filter through the blinds. She hadn't felt this energized, this focused in years. There was power in decision, in action, in finally moving forward after standing still for so long. Martha was just closing her laptop when her phone buzzed with an incoming call. James. She stared at the screen at her son's name and the photo of him that accompanied it, a picture from years ago when his smile still reached his eyes when he looked at her. She almost didn't answer. Almost. "Mom?" His voice was tight, controlled panic, barely contained. "We have a situation. The boutique landlord is threatening eviction. We're behind on rent and he's not giving us any more time. We need 7 500s by the end of the day or we lose the space. Can you help? I promise we'll pay you back this time." This time. As if that promise hadn't been made and broken a dozen times before. Martha closed her eyes, steadying herself against the familiar tide of concern that threatened to wash away her newfound resolve. "I'll come to the boutique this afternoon," she said finally. "We need to talk in person." "Mom, there isn't time for a discussion. We need to wire the money today." "I'll be there at 2, Martha replied, her voice firmer than it had ever been with her son. "If you want my help, you'll make time for a discussion." She ended the call before he could protest further, before she could weaken and give in as she had so many times before. Her hands were shaking slightly, the small act of assertion more difficult than it should have been. But she had done it. The first step on a new path. Martha spent the morning preparing. She gathered her documentation, made copies of key records, and reviewed the notes she had made during her late-night planning session. She dressed with particular care, not in the expensive clothes that Rebecca always suggested, but in a tailored navy pantsuit that she had worn during her accounting days, when clients had respected her expertise and valued her advice. She even applied a touch of lipstick armor of a different kind. The boutique was located in Westfield, an upscale shopping district with carefully curated storefronts and exorbitant rent. Maison de Rebecca read the elegant sign above the door, a name that had always struck Martha as pretentious for a store that primarily sold designer items purchased by Rebecca rather than designed by her. Still, it was a beautiful space with large windows and artful displays that showcased the carefully selected merchandise. Martha pushed open the door, the soft chime announcing her arrival. The boutique was empty of customers, as it often was during weekday afternoons. Rebecca emerged from the back room, her expression a mixture of relief and wariness. James followed close behind, his tie loosened and his forehead creased with worry. "Martha," Rebecca said, the false warmth in her voice painfully obvious now that Martha was finally listening for it. "Thank you for coming." James explained the situation. "He mentioned you're facing eviction," Martha replied, her voice calm as she glanced around the boutique. New inventory filled the rack's expensive pieces with the kind of markup Rebecca had boasted about at dinner just days ago. "Though I'm surprised given how well you said things were going on Sunday." Rebecca and James exchanged a quick glance. "Business is cyclical," Rebecca said smoothly. "We had a slow month, that's all. But we have some big clients lined up, and once we get past this hurdle—" "Let's sit down," Martha interrupted, gesturing to the small seating area near the fitting rooms where Rebecca usually entertained her most valued customers. "We have a lot to discuss." They sat, Martha on one side, James and Rebecca on the other, the physical arrangement a perfect reflection of the emotional divisions between them. Martha placed her folder on the small table that separated them, but didn't open it yet. "I've been supporting this boutique for 3 years now," she began, Over $100,000 in loans that were never repaid, never even acknowledged beyond the moment they were given. "Mom," James started, but Martha held up her hand. "Please let me finish, James. This isn't easy for me." She took a deep breath, centering herself in the calm certainty that had been building since she walked away from that dinner table. "I've enabled a situation that isn't healthy for any of us. You've come to see me as a financial resource rather than a person, and I've allowed it because I was afraid of losing my place in your lives." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting to the door, as if hoping a customer would interrupt this uncomfortable conversation. But the boutique remained empty, the universe conspiring to give Martha this moment of uninterrupted truth. "I'm not here to ask for repayment," Martha continued. "I know that's not realistic right now, but I am here to change our arrangement." She opened the folder, then sliding a document across the table. "This is a proposal for me to convert the money I've already invested into a 49% ownership stake in the boutique. I would become a silent partner entitled to financial reports and consultation on major decisions, but day-to-day operations would remain in your hands." Rebecca's face drained of color. That's not possible. This is my boutique, my vision." "Funded with my money," Martha replied simply. "Money that was meant for my cabin by the lake. Money I earned through years of hard work, just as you're working hard now." James leaned forward, his expression a mixture of confusion and something else, respect perhaps, or at least the beginning of it. "You want to be a part owner of the boutique?" "I already am in every way but legally," Martha said. "This just puts on paper what's already true." "And if we refuse," Rebecca's voice had hardened, the pretense of familial warmth abandoned now that her control was threatened. "Then I wish you the best of luck finding another investor willing to provide $7,500 by the end of the day," Martha replied, "and perhaps explaining to them why your previous investor is no longer involved." The air in the boutique seemed to thicken the silence between them, heavy with unspoken recriminations and shifting power dynamics. Martha waited, allowing them the time to absorb what she was proposing, what she was demanding. She had spent years accommodating their timelines, their emergencies. Now it was their turn to accommodate hers. "Can we have some time to think about this?" James asked finally. "The landlord needs his payment by the end of the day," Martha reminded him gently. "That was what you told me on the phone." Rebecca stood abruptly, moving to the window, as if the air in their small seating area had become too stifling. "This isn't fair," she set her back to them. "You're taking advantage of our situation." The irony of the accusation might have made Martha laugh if the moment wasn't so fraught. Instead, she remained seated calm in the face of Rebecca's agitation. "I'm offering a solution that benefits all of us. You keep the boutique, I protect my investment, and we establish a more honest relationship moving forward." "I need to make a phone call," Rebecca announced suddenly, grabbing her designer purse and heading for the door. "I'll be right back." The bell chimed as she left, leaving Martha and James alone in the quiet boutique. Martha looked at her son, really looked at him, seeing not just the man he had become, but the boy he had been, the child who had once valued her not for what she could give him, but simply for who she was. "When did we become this, James?" she asked softly. "When did money become the only language we speak to each other?" James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that Martha's heart ached with the memory. "I don't know," he admitted. "It just happened, I guess. A little at a time." "That's how most important changes happen," Martha agreed. "So gradually you don't notice until suddenly one day everything is different." "Rebecca won't like this," James said, glancing toward the door where his wife had disappeared. She has a very specific vision for her life, for our life. The boutique is a big part of that." "I understand," Martha said. And she did. She understood ambition, the desire to create something meaningful, to be seen as successful. She had carried those same desires herself once. But vision without fiscal responsibility isn't sustainable. You know that, James. Your father and I taught you better. James nodded, a small acknowledgement that pierced the careful veneer of denial he had constructed around their financial realities. "She's calling her parents," he said after a moment, "to see if they can help instead." Martha hadn't considered that possibility, though in retrospect it seemed obvious. Rebecca's parents lived in Florida, comfortable in their retirement, but not wealthy by any stretch. They had already helped with the initial boutique launch, a fact Rebecca had mentioned more than once when seeking Martha's continued support. "I see," Martha said, keeping her voice neutral. Well, that's certainly an option. They sat in silence. Then the minutes stretching between them filled with all the conversations they should have had years ago. Martha didn't push. She had said what she needed to say. Now it was James's turn to decide what kind of relationship he wanted with his mother moving forward. The bell chimed again as Rebecca returned her face a mask of contained fury. "They can't help," she said tersely. "Not on such short notice." She sat down again, her posture rigid with resistance. "Let me see that agreement again." Martha slid the document back across the table, watching as Rebecca scanned it with narrowed eyes, looking for loopholes for weaknesses she could exploit. Finding none, she looked up, her gaze cold. "Fine," she said finally. "But I want to be clear, this is under duress. We don't have a choice right now." "You always have choices, Rebecca," Martha replied. "This is just the first time I haven't been the easiest one." They signed the agreement there in the boutique, the scratching of pens on paper, the only sound in the otherwise silent space. Martha wrote a check for the landlord, a last infusion of cash to go with her new status as part owner. As she handed it to James, their fingers brushed briefly, and she felt a flicker of the connection that had once existed between them, untarnished by financial transactions and unspoken expectations. "I'll expect monthly financial reports," Martha said as she gathered her things to leave. "And I'd like to review the inventory purchasing plans before any major outlays of cash." Rebecca's smile was tight, her nod barely perceptible, but it was an acknowledgement, however reluctant, of Martha's new role. Not just the silent benefactor, not just the convenient solution to financial problems, but a partner with a voice and a stake in the outcome. As Martha stepped out of the boutique and into the bright afternoon sunlight, she felt lighter than she had in years. Not because everything was resolved, it wasn't not by a long shot, but because she had finally broken free of the pattern that had been slowly draining her life of joy and purpose. The cabin by the lake might still be in her future, she realized. Not immediately, perhaps, but someday. And when she finally sat on that screened-in porch, coffee in hand, and the morning sun reflecting off the water, she would do so not as someone who had sacrificed her dreams for others, but as someone who had found the courage to claim her own place in the world. "Always know where your seat is," Harold had often told her. "And if they don't offer you one, make your own table." For the first time in too long, Martha was building her own table. And it felt exactly right. The signed partnership agreement altered everything and nothing. In the 3 weeks since becoming a part owner of Maison de Rebecca, Martha experienced a strange duality. Her name appeared on legal documents, yet Rebecca treated her presence at the boutique like an unwelcome inspection. Today was no different, as Martha stepped through the front door, greeted by the familiar chime and Rebecca's carefully composed smile that never reached her eyes. "Monthly financial review," Martha announced, holding up the folder containing the reports Rebecca had reluctantly emailed after 3 separate reminders. "I thought we could go through these together." Rebecca's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the garment she was arranging. "I'm with a client right now." Martha glanced around the empty boutique, her gaze settling on Rebecca with quiet challenge. "I'll wait in the back office." The back office bore the marks of Rebecca's design aesthetic, a tufted velvet chair, a gold-leafed desk, and a framed magazine feature celebrating Boston's rising fashion entrepreneurs, with Rebecca's carefully posed photo dominating the page. Martha settled into the chair, spreading the financial statements across the desk. The numbers revealed what Rebecca had been hiding behind her confident exterior, a business hemorrhaging money despite the astronomical markups on merchandise. Inventory costs far exceeded what the boutique could reasonably sell each month. Designer pieces languished on racks for seasons, their value depreciating, while new shipments arrived weekly. Martha noted excessive personal expenses filed under business development, spa days, first-class flights to industry events, restaurant tabs at establishments far too expensive for legitimate client meetings. Most concerning was the $10,000 withdrawal last week, categorized simply as emergency supplies, with no receipts or documentation. An hour passed before Rebecca appeared, irritation evident in her clipped movements. "I don't have much time." Martha tapped her finger on the $10,000 line item. "Let's start with this. What emergency supplies cost exactly $10,000? Rebecca's explanation unfolded like origami, intricate, pre-folded, too perfect. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to purchase next season's collection from an up-and-coming French designer. Exclusive rights for the entire New England area. Guaranteed sales based on industry buzz. Martha listened, recognizing the cadence of rehearsed justification, while a notification pinged on her phone, an email from her bank confirming a transfer of $3,500 to James's personal account 2 days ago. The partnership agreement requires consultation on purchases over $5,000, Martha reminded her, her voice level despite the anger building beneath her practiced accountant's composure. There wasn't time, Rebecca countered. Sometimes in fashion you have to move quickly or lose the opportunity. I used my judgment as the creative director. And the $3,500 transferred to James's account, was that also a fashion emergency? Rebecca's facade cracked momentarily before she recovered, straightening the bracelets on her wrist bracelets Martha had seen in the store inventory last month. James handles our personal finances. You'd have to ask him. I'm asking you, Martha persisted. As a partner in this business, I need to understand where our capital is going. Our capital? Rebecca's laugh held the sharp edge of dismissal. Let's be clear, Martha. You may have bought your way in, but this is still my boutique, my vision, my life's work. You're just the bank. The words hung between them, giving voice to what had always been Rebecca's perception of Martha's role. Not a partner, not family, certainly not someone with wisdom or value beyond her checkbook. Just the bank, a utility to be accessed when needed and ignored otherwise. If I'm just the bank, Martha replied, gathering the financial statements into a neat pile, then you should expect the same level of oversight and accountability any bank would demand from a failing business, starting now. Martha's new assertiveness extended beyond the boutique. She declined dinner invitations framed as family gatherings, but inevitably ended with financial requests. She stopped answering middle-of-the-night texts about urgent business opportunities. She required documentation before approving expenses. Each boundary she established felt both terrifying and exhilarating, a reclamation of power she hadn't realized she'd surrendered. In this newfound space, Martha rediscovered parts of herself long submerged under the weight of others' expectations. She planted a garden starting with practical herbs before expanding to dahlias, whose extravagant blooms served no purpose beyond beauty. She enrolled in a watercolor class at the community center, her initial awkward brushstrokes evolving into increasingly confident compositions. Her first painting, a simple rendering of Lake Harmony's shoreline, now hung in her living room, imperfect, but entirely hers. Most significantly, Martha began volunteering at a financial literacy program for women over 50. Many participants were widows or divorcees navigating financial independence for the first time. Others had surrendered fiscal control to children or partners. Martha recognized herself in their stories, the same patterns of accommodation, the same fear of asserting needs, the same confusion between generosity and self-erasure. Always remember, she told them during her first workshop, money isn't just currency, it's power, choice, and voice. When you surrender control of your finances, you're often surrendering much more. This Tuesday evening found Martha preparing for her third workshop, organizing handouts on predatory lending practices targeting seniors. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carol. How's my favorite financial revolutionary dinner Friday? Martha smiled at the message. Her friendship with Carol had deepened in recent weeks, their conversations expanding beyond Martha's family situation to books, politics, travel aspirations, and the peculiar challenges and freedoms of aging as a woman in America. Carol had invited Martha to join her book club, 6 women all over 60, all with stories of reinvention after loss or change. For the first time in years, Martha was building connections based not on what she could provide, but on mutual respect and genuine affinity. The doorbell interrupted her preparations. James stood on her porch, his expression caught between determination and discomfort. He held a small gift bag. I missed you at Sunday dinner, he offered as Martha invited him in. Rebecca made that roast you like. Martha accepted the gift bag, finding inside a container of leftovers and a store-bought card signed by James alone. Thank you. I've been busy with my volunteer work. James wandered into her living room, noticing the changes, new throw pillows in vibrant colors, art supplies organized on a side table, a half-completed puzzle occupying the coffee table where financial paperwork once dominated. The place looks different. I'm different, Martha acknowledged, settling into her favorite reading chair and gesturing for James to sit. How's Jacob? His science fair is coming up, isn't it? The conversation meandered through safe topics, Jacob's project on renewable energy, the unseasonably warm weather, a mutual acquaintance's retirement before James finally arrived at his purpose. Rebecca's upset about the changes at the boutique. She feels like you're second-guessing every decision. I'm reviewing expenses and requiring accountability, Martha corrected. That was our agreement. She says you're holding up approvals for the fall collection. The deadlines for ordering are this week. Martha had indeed questioned the proposed fall inventory $45,000 for merchandise when they still had spring pieces unsold. The boutique can't support that level of inventory when sales haven't improved. We need to move current stock before investing in new pieces. Fashion doesn't work that way, James insisted, repeating Rebecca's argument verbatim. You have to stay ahead of trends. Rebecca knows what she's doing. The financial reports suggest otherwise. Martha's voice remained gentle despite her firmness. The boutique lost money last quarter even with my investment. We're selling at a 300% markup but still can't cover costs because the buying patterns are unsustainable. That's just temporary. Rebecca says, Martha interrupted, finally allowing her frustration to surface. Do you ever question what Rebecca says, James? Do you ever look at the actual numbers? James flushed, defensive anger rising to mask his discomfort with financial realities. You don't understand her vision. The boutique isn't just about profit. It's about establishing a brand, a reputation. That takes time and investment. Investment requires return, Martha countered. Not just financially, but in how people are treated. Has Rebecca ever thanked you for connecting me to the boutique? Has she acknowledged that without my money there would be no Maison de Rebecca? James's silence provided the answer she already knew. His gaze dropped to the floor, then fixed on the watercolor of Lake Harmony. Did you paint that? I did. My second attempt. It's good. I didn't know you painted. There's a lot you don't know about me, James. Martha's observation carried no accusation, just quiet sadness. When was the last time you asked? The question lingered unanswered as James shifted the conversation back to safer ground, the boutique's needs. Rebecca's stressed the upcoming fall season critical for establishing the store's reputation among Boston's elite shoppers. Martha listened, recognizing the familiar pattern. James had always been the mediator caught between his wife's demands and his mother's generosity, unable or unwilling to challenge either. I'll review the fall purchasing proposal again, Martha conceded finally. But I won't approve the full amount without a plan to move current inventory. That's basic business sense, not personal. James left with promises to relay her position to Rebecca, though Martha harbored no illusions about how her message would be received. The visit left her unsettled, aware of the growing chasm between the family she had and the relationship she wanted. She returned to her workshop preparations, finding comfort in the clarity of numbers and the straightforward exchange of knowledge. The next morning, Martha arrived at the boutique for her scheduled hours, another condition of the partnership agreement. She spent Wednesday afternoons assisting with inventory management and bookkeeping skills Rebecca had initially dismissed, but now reluctantly utilized. The boutique was quiet when she arrived, with only Melissa, the part-time sales associate, arranging a new window display. Rebecca's at a vendor meeting, Melissa explained, her tone carefully neutral. She left some paperwork for you on the desk. The paperwork consisted of a revised fall purchasing proposal with only minor reductions from the original budget, accompanied by a note in Rebecca's flowing script. As discussed with James, these purchases are time-sensitive and require immediate approval. Martha sighed at the transparent manipulation. No actual discussion had resulted in this compromise, only Rebecca's assumption that James's intervention would soften Martha's resolve. She set the proposal aside and focused on reconciling last week's sales, a task that revealed more discrepancies between inventory records and actual stock. She was cross-referencing serial numbers on designer handbags when Rebecca swept in, trailing the scent of expensive perfume and carrying shopping bags from luxury retailers down the street. Oh, good you're here. Did you see my revised proposal? I need that approval today. Martha glanced at the shopping bags. New inventory, personal shopping. Rebecca dismissed, setting the bags behind the counter. About the proposal. I found some discrepancies in the inventory, Martha interrupted, maintaining her focus on the task at hand. 3 handbags from the spring collection are missing from the floor, but haven't been recorded as sold. Rebecca's momentary freeze might have been imperceptible to anyone else, but Martha had become adept at reading her daughter-in-law's micro-expressions. We use display models for photo shoots sometimes. They're probably in the storage room. I checked there first, Martha countered, her voice pleasant but persistent. According to the system, we should have 23 designer bags in stock. I can only locate 20. I'll look into it, Rebecca promised with dismissive ease. Now about the fall collection. 3 missing handbags at $2,800 retail represents a significant inventory discrepancy. Martha continued, unwilling to be diverted. I'd like to resolve this before discussing additional purchases. The tension between them crystallized, sharp-edged, and dangerous. Rebecca's carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing the contempt she typically concealed beneath layers of polite distance. You're becoming obsessive about these details. This is exactly why artists and accountants don't mix. Accountability isn't obsession, Martha corrected. It's good business. Is that what this is about, business? Rebecca's laugh held no humor. Let's be honest, Martha. This is about control. You resent my success, my relationship with James, the life we've built. You couldn't stand being sidelined, so you're using your money to force your way in where you're not wanted. Each word struck with precision, targeting Martha's deepest insecurities. The fear of irrelevance, of being unnecessary, of losing her only child to a woman who viewed her as competition rather than family. In the past, such accusations would have sent Martha retreating into placating accommodation. Now she recognized the manipulation for what it was. If I wanted control, Martha replied evenly, I would have demanded 51% ownership instead of 49%. I would have fired you as creative director and installed someone who understands basic inventory management. I would have required repayment of the loans that built this boutique in the first place. She closed the inventory binder with deliberate calm. What I want is transparency, Rebecca. If you've sold those handbags privately, or taken them for personal use, or given them to friends, just record it properly. But don't pretend they're mysteriously missing while asking me to fund more inventory. Rebecca's composure shattered completely. You think I'm stealing from my own boutique after everything I've sacrificed to build this business? What exactly have you sacrificed? Martha asked, genuine curiosity in her question. From where I stand, you've had every advantage: financial backing with no repayment terms, a husband who supports your dream without question, a safety net for every misstep. That's not sacrifice. That's privilege. The truth landed like a physical blow. Rebecca grabbed her purse, muttering about appointments and vendor meetings, fleeing the boutique, rather than continuing the confrontation. Martha remained the inventory binder open before her, aware that she'd crossed a line from which there would be no easy return. That evening, Martha received a call from James, his voice tight with suppressed anger. What did you say to Rebecca? She came home crying, saying you accused her of theft. I asked about inventory discrepancies, Martha explained, keeping her tone neutral despite her son's hostility. 3 designer bags are missing without record of sale or transfer. And you immediately assumed she stole them, James demanded. Your own daughter-in-law, the mother of your grandson. I asked for an explanation, Martha corrected. Rebecca chose to interpret that as an accusation. She built that boutique from nothing. James continued his defense of Rebecca, practiced and automatic. She works 16-hour days. She's connected with designers nobody in Boston could access before, and you're counting handbags like she's some kind of criminal. Martha absorbed her son's anger, recognizing in it the same blind devotion that had allowed their financial exploitation to continue unchecked for years. The boutique was built with my money, James. Money meant for my retirement, for the cabin I dreamed about, for the life I put on hold to support your family. Asking for accurate inventory records isn't an attack. It's basic business practice. This isn't about business for you, James accused. This is about punishing Rebecca because you don't like her. It always has been. The unfairness of the accusation stole Martha's breath momentarily. I supported Rebecca's dream for 3 years without question. I gave her over $100,000. I attended every boutique event, praised her to my friends, bought her merchandise at full price, even knowing the markup. How is that not liking her? If you liked her, you'd trust her, James insisted. You wouldn't be questioning every decision, demanding receipts, checking inventory like some kind of auditor. Trust is earned, Martha replied softly. And it's a 2-way street. Has Rebecca earned my trust, James? Has she been transparent about the boutique's finances? Has she treated my investment with respect? James's silence acknowledged what he couldn't bring himself to say. Martha continued, her voice gentle but unwavering. I don't dislike Rebecca. I admire her ambition and creativity, but I won't be treated like an ATM while being excluded from decisions about my own money. It's always about the money with you, James muttered, the unfairness of his accusation hanging between them. You've changed, Mom. You used to be supportive. I'm still supportive, Martha corrected. I'm just no longer silent. The call ended with unresolved tension, leaving Martha drained but determined. She reached for her watercolors, finding solace in the meditative process of mixing pigments and applying wash to paper. Tonight, she attempted a sunset over Lake Harmony, working from memory and desire rather than direct observation. The resulting image was impressionistic, more emotion than precision, yet somehow more honest for its imperfections. Im lang không phải là su vang mat. Im lang là su lua chan. Im lang là sức mạnh de quacklin tamau lua. The Vietnamese proverb her college roommate had shared decades ago came back to Martha now, its wisdom resonating with her current situation. Silence is not absence. Silence is choice. Silence is strength dressed in satin. For too long, Martha had confused silence with peace accommodation with love. She had surrendered her voice to maintain relationships that in retrospect had been conditioned on her compliance. Now speaking her truth felt simultaneously terrifying and essential, a reclamation of self that threatened the family dynamic, but honored her worth. The following days brought no communication from James or Rebecca, though Martha continued her scheduled hours at the boutique, working primarily with Melissa to reorganize inventory and implement a more efficient tracking system. The missing handbags remained unaccounted for their absence, a silent indictment neither acknowledged nor explained. Martha approved a modified fall purchasing plan allocating funds for strategic new pieces while requiring a sale to move stagnant inventory, a reasonable compromise that nonetheless went unacknowledged by Rebecca, who communicated exclusively through terse emails and notes left on the office desk. At home, Martha expanded her garden and continued her watercolor practice. She found unexpected joy in these simple pursuits, pleasure derived not from achievement but from engagement. The community center classes introduced her to other women exploring new interests in their 60s and 70s, a retired nurse learning ceramics, a former teacher studying Italian, a widowed homemaker taking up photography. They shared coffee after class, their conversations weaving between creative challenges and life transitions, building a tapestry of connection based on shared experience rather than obligation. Martha's financial literacy workshops grew in popularity, attracting women from across the community. She developed specialized sessions on retirement planning, protection against fraud targeting seniors, and strategies for maintaining financial independence while supporting adult children. This last topic informed by her own hard-earned wisdom. Helping family is natural and good, she told participants, but always ask yourself, am I giving from abundance or depleting my security? Am I being generous or being used? The difference matters. The workshops brought Martha to the attention of Susan Bailey, owner of Harmony Cafe, a popular local establishment known for its community focus and excellent pastries. Susan attended one of Martha's sessions on small business accounting afterward, inviting her to provide consulting services for the cafe's expanding catering business. I know enough to know what I don't know, Susan explained over coffee at Martha's kitchen table. I can bake a perfect scone, but depreciation schedules make my eyes cross. I need someone who speaks fluent spreadsheet, but won't talk down to me. The consulting arrangement began casually, 2 hours weekly, reviewing the cafe's books and establishing systems for the catering division. But Martha found unexpected satisfaction in applying her professional skills to a thriving, ethically run business. Susan valued her expertise, implemented her suggestions, and compensated her fairly, a refreshing dynamic after years of having her knowledge dismissed by her own family. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Susan invited Martha to join the cafe's monthly vendor dinner, an informal gathering of local business owners who supplied the cafe with everything from organic produce to handcrafted pottery. It's part networking, part social club, Susan explained. Good food, interesting conversation, no pretension. The dinner was held in the cafe after closing tables pushed together family style and laden with Susan's creations, showcasing each vendor's contributions. Martha found herself seated beside Thomas Chen, a retired engineer who grew heirloom vegetables for the cafe, and across from Diane Miller, whose small batch jams and preserves were cafe staples. The conversation flowed naturally between business challenges, gardening tips, local politics, and gentle teasing among people who clearly enjoyed each other's company. "So you're the spreadsheet whisperer," Thomas commented when Susan introduced Martha's role. "About time someone brought financial sense to this operation. Susan makes the best blackberry scones in Massachusetts, but can't calculate a profit margin to save her life." Susan laughed, unaffected by the gentle critique. "That's why I hire people smarter than me for the things I'm bad at." Speaking of which, Martha's helping me price the new catering menu. No more undercharging for wedding cakes that take 3 days to create. Thank goodness, Diane chimed in. I've been telling her for years she needs to value her time properly. People who appreciate quality will pay for it. Martha savored the dynamic, the easy exchange of ideas, the mutual respect among peers, the absence of hidden agendas or emotional manipulation. These people operated from a foundation of reciprocity and fair exchange that had been notably absent from her family relationships. They valued what each person contributed to the community they'd built together. As the evening progressed, Martha found herself sharing stories about her accounting career, her watercolor attempts, even her dream of a cabin by Lake Harmony. Thomas knew the area well and offered recommendations for hiking trails with spectacular views worth painting. Diane promised to bring her special elderflower preserves to their next gathering, perfect with afternoon tea while you're working on those financial projections for Susan. Martha returned home that evening with a warmth that had nothing to do with the excellent wine served at dinner, and everything to do with being seen, heard, and valued for exactly who she was. This feeling of belonging, not based on family obligation, but on genuine connection, was something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. The contrast became even sharper the following day, when she arrived at the boutique to find Rebecca engaged in animated conversation with a stylish woman Martha didn't recognize. Rebecca's demeanor transformed instantly from warm engagement to cool professional distance. Martha, this is Elaine Winters from Boston Fashion Week. Elaine, my mother-in-law Martha, who helps with our bookkeeping. The deliberate diminishment of Martha's role from investment partner to clerical assistant was unmistakable. So too was Rebecca's message in the world she aspired to. Martha was an inconvenient footnote rather than an integral part of the boutique's success. Martha offered a pleasant greeting to Elaine before excusing herself to the back office where quarterly tax preparations awaited her attention. She worked methodically through the afternoon, organizing documentation and ensuring compliance requirements were met, essential tasks that Rebecca neither understood nor valued, yet which protected the boutique from potential financial penalties. When Elaine departed, Rebecca entered the office in high spirits. Elaine wants to feature Maison de Rebecca in the Emerging Designers Showcase at Fashion Week. It's exactly the exposure we need to attract the right clientele. Congratulations, Martha offered, genuine in her acknowledgement of the opportunity. What's the investment required for participation? Rebecca's enthusiasm dimmed slightly at the practical question. There's a showcase fee of $5,000 plus we'll need to create several exclusive pieces for the runway presentation. I'm thinking we allocate about $15,000 total. That's a significant expenditure, Martha noted, turning to her computer to review the boutique's current cash flow projections. Let me see where we stand. This isn't something to analyze to death, Rebecca objected, impatience edging her voice. It's a strategic opportunity that could transform the boutique's position in the market. I understand the potential benefit, Martha assured her, but we still need to determine if the finances support the investment. The screen revealed what Martha already suspected: the boutique's cash reserves wouldn't cover the proposed expenditure without another capital infusion. 3 months of Martha's financial oversight had improved inventory management and reduced unnecessary expenses, but the business had yet to achieve consistent profitability. Each month still required careful balancing of incoming revenue against outstanding obligations. We don't have $15,000 available without compromising our ability to meet regular expenses, Martha explained, turning the screen so Rebecca could see the figures herself. We could manage perhaps $7,000 by adjusting the fall inventory orders. $7,000 isn't enough, Rebecca dismissed without even glancing at the spreadsheet. This is Fashion Week, Martha. It's not the time for half measures. Then we need to find additional revenue or reduce costs elsewhere, Martha suggested reasonably. Perhaps we could hold a pre-fall sale to move some of the spring inventory that's still taking up floor space. Rebecca's expression hardened, her posture shifting from collaborative to confrontational. A sale you want Boston's premier boutique to hold a bargain basement clearance like some mall chain store that would destroy everything I've built. What you've built, Martha pointed out carefully, is a business that consistently spends more than it earns. That's not sustainable without constant external funding. Which is exactly why we need Fashion Week exposure to attract the high-end clients who won't blink at our price points. Rebecca's frustration boiled over into accusation. This is why mixing family and business never works. You don't understand fashion. You don't understand vision. You're so focused on pennies that you can't see the bigger picture. I see a business that could be profitable with better financial management, Martha countered, maintaining her composure despite Rebecca's escalating tone. Fashion Week might bring exposure, but it won't fix the fundamental issues with how this boutique operates. And what would you know about how a boutique should operate? Rebecca demanded. You with your sensible shoes and discount department store clothes. You think your accounting degree qualifies you to make decisions about haute couture. The dismissal was meant to wound, to remind Martha of her place in Rebecca's hierarchy of value firmly at the bottom. In the past, such cutting remarks would have sent Martha retreating into apologetic silence. Now she recognized the attack for what it was, desperation clothed as superiority. My accounting degree qualifies me to recognize when a business is failing despite its potential, Martha replied evenly. And my investment in this boutique gives me both the right and the responsibility to protect that investment. Rebecca's laugh was brittle with contempt. Your investment. As if writing a check makes you an expert. Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for this boutique? The connections I've built, the reputation I've established. While you were counting beans in your little suburban office, I was creating something extraordinary. Martha absorbed the insults without reaction, her calm further inflaming Rebecca's anger. You've never respected me, Rebecca continued, her voice rising. You've never believed in what I'm building here. You've just been waiting for an opportunity to undermine me to prove yourself right. That's not true, Martha disagreed gently. I believed in you enough to invest my retirement savings in your vision. I just expected basic financial responsibility in return. Financial responsibility, Rebecca echoed mockingly. Code for control, for keeping me dependent on your approval. Well, I don't need your permission, Martha. I'm going to secure our place at Fashion Week with or without your support. How? Martha asked simply. The boutique doesn't have the funds. Rebecca's expression shifted, calculation replacing outright hostility. James and I will find a way. We always do. The implication hung between them that James would side with his wife, that alternative financing would be arranged, that Martha's partnership would be circumvented rather than respected. Martha felt a deep weariness settle into her bones, not from the confrontation itself, but from the recognition that nothing had fundamentally changed, despite her attempts at establishing boundaries. I see, she said finally. Then there's nothing more to discuss until you have a concrete proposal for funding. Rebecca departed with a triumphant sweep, leaving Martha alone in the office, surrounded by spreadsheets that told the unvarnished truth no one else wanted to acknowledge. The boutique was not failing due to lack of opportunity or exposure, but because its fundamental business model prioritized appearance over sustainability, prestige over profit. No amount of Fashion Week exposure would fix that underlying reality. Martha finished the tax documentation before locking the office and departing through the back door, unwilling to navigate the sales floor where Rebecca was now animatedly discussing Fashion Week with Melissa, as if the decision had already been made. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, the summer air heavy with impending rain. Martha drove home with her windows down, letting the wind clear her head of the boutique's persistent scent of expensive perfume and pretension. At home, she found comfort in her garden, deadheading spent blooms and weeding between rows of herbs, whose pungent fragrance grounded her in simple, tangible reality. The physical work allowed her mind to process the confrontation, separating emotional reaction from practical consideration. By the time she showered away the garden soil and settled on her porch with a glass of iced tea, Martha had reached a decision that felt both inevitable and liberating. She could continue fighting for financial responsibility at the boutique, butting heads with Rebecca over every expenditure while being treated as an obstacle rather than a partner. Or she could recognize that some battles couldn't be won, not because she lacked determination, but because the other party was playing by entirely different rules. The sound of tires on her driveway interrupted her contemplation. James's car pulled up, his expression visible through the windshield, a familiar mixture of discomfort and determination that signaled another attempt at mediation. Another round of Rebecca says, and you don't understand, and family should support each other. Martha set down her tea and straightened her shoulders, prepared for the conversation to come. Not with defensiveness or resignation, but with the quiet certainty of someone who finally understood her own worth. Im lang không phải là sự vắng mặt. Im lang là sự lựa chọn. Silence is not absence. Silence is choice. And sometimes the most powerful choice is knowing when to speak, when to listen, and when to walk away. James stood on Martha's porch shoulders, hunched against an emotional rather than physical weight. Rebecca told me what happened, about Fashion Week. Martha gestured toward the porch swing where they had once spent summer evenings when Jacob was small, reading stories and watching fireflies emerge at dusk. Those uncomplicated moments felt impossibly distant now. I've been thinking about our arrangement at the boutique. Martha began bypassing the specific argument to address the larger pattern. It's not working, James. Because you won't approve the Fashion Week showcase, he countered immediately. Rebecca says it's critical for the boutique's reputation. All the serious designers participate. Martha noted the familiar refrain Rebecca says that had become the North Star of her son's decision-making. The boutique doesn't have $15,000 available without neglecting other financial obligations. That's not opinion. It's mathematical fact. We could find the money, James persisted. Maybe take a small loan or I could provide it, Martha finished for him. That's why you're here, isn't it? To convince me to invest more despite being treated like an unwelcome auditor rather than a partner. The accuracy of her assessment registered in James's flinch a momentary crack in his practiced role as mediator. It's not like that. Rebecca respects your input. She just operates as if I don't exist until she needs money, Martha interrupted gently. She dismisses my concerns, ignores the partnership agreement, and treats my business experience as irrelevant. She's under tremendous pressure, James defended. Fashion Week could change everything for the boutique. It's her chance to be recognized in the industry. Martha studied her son, recognizing in him the same pattern she had enabled for years, this reflexive defense of Rebecca regardless of circumstances. I'm not unsympathetic to Rebecca's ambitions, but I can't keep funding a business that consistently ignores sound financial practices. So you're just going to block the showcase, sabotage her big opportunity because she didn't file the right paperwork. Anger edged James's voice, the familiar accusation that Martha was being deliberately difficult rather than responsibly cautious. I'm not blocking anything, Martha clarified. I'm simply not providing additional funding without proper planning and accountability. There's a difference. The distinction was lost on James, whose perspective had been shaped by years of Martha's unconditional financial support. The concept that she might establish boundaries around her resources registered as betrayal rather than reasonable self-protection. I thought you wanted to be part of the business, he challenged. Isn't that why you forced the partnership agreement in the first place? And now when there's an important decision to be made, you're standing in the way. I wanted to protect my investment, Martha corrected. But I've realized that's impossible when my partner views me as an obstacle rather than a collaborator. Rain began to fall, soft pattering against the porch roof, underscoring the heaviness between them. Martha took a deep breath, centering herself for the decision she'd reached during her garden contemplation. I'm willing to sell my share of the boutique back to Rebecca. The offer hung between them, unexpected enough to momentarily silence James's prepared arguments. What then? I'll convert my ownership back to a standard business loan with reasonable repayment terms, Martha continued. Rebecca regains full control, and I remove myself from operations entirely. You'd do that? Suspicion colored James's response as if searching for the hidden catch. Just walk away. Not without protection for my investment, Martha clarified. I'd require proper loan documentation, a realistic payment schedule, and collateral to secure the debt. Understanding dawned in James's expression as he recognized that Martha's proposal, while appearing conciliatory, still maintained financial accountability. Rebecca won't agree to collateral. The boutique is her life's work. She wouldn't risk losing control. She already risked it when she accepted my investment without establishing clear terms, Martha pointed out. I'm offering a path to regain her autonomy while respecting my financial contribution. It sounds like an ultimatum, James accused, retreating to defensive posturing. Either she pledges the boutique as collateral, or you remain a partner she can't work with. It's not an ultimatum, Martha disagreed. It's a business reality. No bank would provide unsecured funding to a boutique with the current financial performance. I'm actually offering more generous terms than she'd get elsewhere. The rain intensified, mirroring the gathering storm between them. James stood, restless energy propelling him to pace the limited confines of the porch. Why are you making this so difficult? Why can't you just help us like you always have? The question revealed everything about their fractured dynamic. The expectation that Martha would perpetually sacrifice her own security for their comfort, the entitlement to her resources without reciprocal respect, the fundamental assumption that her role was to give without condition. Because that pattern wasn't helping any of us, Martha answered honestly. It was teaching Rebecca that financial consequences don't apply to her. It was teaching you that my resources are your safety net. And it was teaching me that my value in this family is measured by what I provide, rather than who I am. James stopped pacing, momentarily struck by this framing of their long-established dynamic. That's not fair. We appreciate everything you've done. Appreciation without respect isn't enough, Martha replied softly. Not anymore. The finality in her tone registered, drawing James back to sit beside her on the swing. For several minutes, they watched the rain in silence, each calculating private equations of need, resentment, love, and practicality. I'll talk to Rebecca about your offer, James finally conceded, but I can't promise she'll accept. I understand, Martha acknowledged. Either way, I've made my decision. Things need to change. After James departed, taillights disappearing into the rainy evening, Martha remained on the porch swing, letting the rhythmic creaking soothe her jangled nerves. The conversation had unfolded largely as anticipated, James prioritizing Rebecca's desires, minimizing Martha's concerns, ultimately retreating when confronted with firm boundaries. What surprised her was not his reaction, but her own steadiness throughout the absence of that familiar desperate need to please, to accommodate, to sacrifice her interests for familial peace. 2 days later, a thick official-looking envelope arrived through Martha's mail slot. She recognized the law firm's letterhead before she even opened it. Anderson and Mitchell, the same attorneys who had prepared the original partnership agreement. Inside dense legal language obscured a simple message: Rebecca was suing to invalidate Martha's ownership stake in the boutique, claiming coercion and undue influence exercised during a period of financial vulnerability. Martha read the filing twice, disbelief giving way to a cold clarity as she absorbed the accusations. According to Rebecca's sworn statement, Martha had exploited the boutique's temporary cash flow shortage to force an inequitable ownership arrangement that Rebecca had accepted under extreme duress, with no meaningful opportunity to seek independent counsel. The narrative constructed was both strategic and breathtaking in its distortion. It portrayed Martha as a calculating predator rather than a repeatedly generous supporter, recasting 3 years of financial assistance as a sinister scheme to seize control of Rebecca's business. Most painful was the final paragraph where Rebecca claimed Martha had leveraged her maternal relationship with James to create division in our marriage when her business demands were refused. Martha set the documents on her kitchen counter and made a cup of tea with methodical precision, the familiar ritual providing stability as she processed this new betrayal. The lawsuit wasn't merely a business dispute. It was character assassination cloaked in legal terminology, an attempt to rewrite their shared history with Martha cast as villain rather than victim. When the tea was steeped, Martha picked up her phone and called Carol, whose legal background and steady friendship offered the perspective she desperately needed. Can you come over? I've received something you should see. Carol arrived 30 minutes later, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the legal filings spread across Martha's kitchen table. This is quite the creative writing exercise, she remarked, her dry tone masking genuine outrage. Particularly this bit about you systematically isolating the plaintiff from financial advisors who might have warned against the inequitable arrangement. Is it possible? Martha asked the question that had been circling her mind since the envelope arrived. Could they actually win this case? Carol removed her glasses, considering Martha with the frank assessment of both friend and attorney. Anything's possible in court, but based on what you've shown me, the documentation of your loans, the emails requesting financial assistance, the timeline of events, Rebecca's narrative has significant factual hurdles to overcome. She claims I forced her into the agreement when the boutique was facing eviction, Martha noted, pointing to the specific allegation. That part is true. They were about to lose the lease. Context matters, Carol countered. Offering financial assistance with conditions when someone is in crisis isn't automatically coercive, particularly when the crisis resulted from their own financial mismanagement and the assistance preserved their business. Carol's practical analysis provided some comfort, but the emotional impact of the lawsuit remained a bruising reality. This wasn't just a legal challenge. It was Rebecca's declaration of war, a scorched earth approach that would inevitably destroy whatever fragile family connections remained. I need someone who specializes in this type of case, Martha decided. Someone who won't be intimidated by Rebecca's narrative. Carol nodded, reaching for her phone. I know just the person. Margot Delaney. Retired from her firm last year, but still takes select cases. Brilliant litigator with particular expertise in family business disputes. The following afternoon, Martha sat across from Margot Delaney in the older woman's home office, a converted sunroom overlooking a meticulously maintained garden. At 72, Margot radiated the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades prevailing in contested courtrooms, without feeling compelled to raise her voice. "Your daughter-in-law has constructed an interesting narrative," Margot observed, closing the folder containing Martha's financial records and the lawsuit filing. "Fortunately for us, narratives require evidence, and the evidence strongly favors your position." "Rebecca is very persuasive," Martha cautioned. "She presents well, speaks confidently, and genuinely believes she's the wronged party." "Self-deception makes for compelling testimony," Margot acknowledged. "But documents tell their own story. Your bank records show 3 years of consistent financial support before the ownership agreement. The emails requesting those funds undermine any claim of systematic manipulation on your part." Margot outlined a straightforward strategy, comprehensive documentation of Martha's financial contributions, clear timeline, establishing the pattern of support sworn statements from witnesses to Martha's generosity, including the boutique's landlord and vendors whose invoices Martha had paid directly. "What about James?" Martha asked the question that had been haunting her since the lawsuit arrived. "Will he have to testify?" Margot's expression softened slightly, recognizing the heartbreak beneath the procedural inquiry. "Potentially. As someone present during key discussions, his testimony would be relevant. The prospect of facing her son across a courtroom, of watching him potentially support Rebecca's distorted narrative, sent a physical pain through Martha's chest. "He might side with her," she admitted quietly. "He usually does." "Family loyalty is complex," Margot acknowledged. "But testimony is given under oath, and the documentation is quite clear. Your son would need to directly contradict written evidence to fully support his wife's claims." Preparation for the hearing consumed the next 3 weeks. Martha provided Margot with exhaustive financial records, email communications, and contact information for potential witnesses. The boutique's landlord submitted an affidavit confirming Martha had directly paid overdue rent that prevented eviction. 2 vendors provided statements documenting Martha's personal payments for inventory when the boutique's accounts were overextended. Throughout this period, Martha received no communication from James or Rebecca beyond formal legal notices. Jacob's birthday passed without the customary celebration, Martha's gift and card sent through the mail rather than delivered in person. The silence from her only child carved fresh wounds atop the existing injury of the lawsuit, a double betrayal that left Martha alternating between grief and a cold, clarifying anger. She channeled these complex emotions into practical action, expanding her consulting work with Susan's Cafe, developing advanced financial literacy workshops, completing a series of Lake Harmony watercolors that now hung in her hallway. Each activity reinforced her identity beyond James's mother or Rebecca's investor, establishing a foundation of purpose that couldn't be dismantled by their rejection. The morning of the hearing arrived with crisp autumn clarity, red and gold leaves spiraling down as Martha walked from the parking garage to the county courthouse. Margot waited on the steps, tailored charcoal suit and silver hair, projecting authority without ostentation. "Ready?" she inquired, briefcase containing their meticulously organized evidence. Martha nodded, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her navy dress. "As ready as possible." Inside, the courtroom's formal architecture emphasized the gravity of proceedings about to unfold. Martha spotted Rebecca and James seated at the plaintiff's table, heads bent in conversation with their attorney. Neither acknowledged her entrance, though Martha caught Rebecca's sideways glance, quickly averted when their eyes might have met. Judge Eleanor Simmons entered, a woman perhaps a decade older than Martha, with silver-streaked dark hair and reading glasses chained around her neck. Her demeanor projected no-nonsense efficiency as she reviewed the case summary before addressing the assembled parties. "This is a petition to invalidate a business ownership agreement on grounds of coercion and undue influence," she noted. "Given the nature of these allegations, I'll hear opening statements followed by direct evidence. Ms. Winters, as plaintiff, you may begin." Rebecca's attorney approached the podium, his expensive suit and cultivated earnestness establishing him as someone accustomed to high-stakes corporate litigation. His opening framed Rebecca as a creative visionary whose dream had been manipulated by a controlling mother-in-law, exploiting familial connections and financial vulnerability to force an unconscionable agreement. "Ms. Winters accepted this one-sided partnership only under extreme duress, Your Honor," he emphasized. Faced with losing her life's work and given no opportunity for independent counsel, she signed away half her business to someone with no fashion experience or industry connections. Martha maintained a neutral expression despite the mischaracterization noting the strategic half, rather than the actual 49% stake, the omission of her 3 years of financial support, the portrayal of her as an industry outsider, rather than the boutique's primary financial backer. When Margot rose for the defense opening, her approach provided stark contrast. No emotional appeals, just a clear roadmap of documented evidence that would systematically dismantle Rebecca's narrative. The evidence will show that Mrs. Gardner provided over $127,000 in financial support to Maison de Rebecca over 3 years before the partnership agreement, Margot stated. Far from exerting undue influence, Mrs. Gardner responded to repeated requests for assistance preserving a business that would have otherwise failed multiple times due to the plaintiff's financial mismanagement. The hearing proceeded with clinical efficiency, each side presenting documentary evidence and witness testimony. Rebecca took the stand first. Her carefully curated appearance, understated designer suit, minimal jewelry, hair styled simply projecting authentic entrepreneurial determination rather than the luxury lifestyle Martha had observed her cultivating. Her testimony painted Martha as increasingly controlling, using financial support to gain inappropriate influence over business decisions, ultimately forcing the partnership agreement by threatening to withhold funds needed to prevent eviction. "I had no choice," Rebecca insisted, voice modulated to convey restrained emotion. "Without that money, I would have lost everything I'd worked for. She knew that and used it against me." During cross-examination, Margot methodically contrasted Rebecca's narrative with documented evidence emails, showing Rebecca repeatedly initiating requests for funds bank records revealing personal expenses paid from business accounts, the boutique's consistent financial shortfalls despite substantial investment. "Ms. Winters, these emails show you requested financial assistance from Mrs. Gardner 27 times over 3 years, Margot noted. In this message dated January 15th, you wrote, and I quote, "Martha, we have another opportunity that requires immediate funding. James said you mentioned wanting to be more involved in the boutique. Perhaps we could discuss that when you transfer the money." Would you characterize that as Mrs. Gardner forcing involvement, or are you suggesting it as inducement for continued financial support? Rebecca's composure wavered momentarily before she recovered. "That's being taken out of context. I was just trying to make her feel included since she seemed interested in the business. And these bank statements showing boutique funds used for personal expenses, $3,200 at Canyon Ranch Spa, $4,750 at Tiffany & Company, $6,800 for a family vacation to Nantucket, were these legitimate business expenditures?" "Those were business development activities," Rebecca insisted. "Building connections with potential clients representing the boutique's lifestyle brand. The industry operates differently than conventional businesses." Throughout Rebecca's testimony, Martha avoided looking at James, focusing instead on her own clasped hands or the documents Margot referenced. She couldn't bear to see his reaction as the financial reality of the boutique was systematically exposed, not just Rebecca's mismanagement, but the extent of Martha's support that had kept their lifestyle afloat while being characterized as interference. When Martha's turn came to testify, she spoke plainly about the pattern of financial requests, her growing concerns about the boutique's sustainability, and the partnership agreement she proposed to protect her substantial investment, while giving Rebecca continued operational control. "I never threatened to withhold funds if Rebecca refused the partnership," Martha testified. "I offered a business solution to an ongoing problem. The boutique needed capital it couldn't obtain elsewhere because no traditional lender would finance its current operation without significant changes to management practices." "And did you prevent Ms. Winters from seeking independent legal advice regarding the partnership agreement?" Margot asked, addressing a key element of Rebecca's coercion claim. "Quite the contrary," Martha replied. "The agreement was drafted by her regular business attorney, Mr. Phillips, who had represented the boutique since its inception. Rebecca selected him, communicated with him directly, and had 3 days to review the agreement before signing." The attorney in question, Alan Phillips, provided confirmation via affidavit, unable to testify in person due to scheduled surgery. His statement corroborated Martha's account, noting that he had advised Rebecca about the partnership terms and found them consistent with standard practice for capital infusion in a financially distressed business. By mid-afternoon, evidence presentation concluded without James being called to testify, a strategic decision by Rebecca's attorney, Margot, later explained likely because his testimony would either contradict documented evidence or undermine his wife's narrative. Instead, both attorneys presented closing arguments summarizing their positions. Judge Simmons reviewed her notes before addressing the courtroom. "I'll take these materials under advisement and issue a ruling," she announced. "Given the straightforward nature of the evidence, I don't anticipate requiring extended deliberation." Outside the courthouse, Martha stood with Margot in the crisp autumn air, emotionally depleted, yet strangely peaceful. The truth had been spoken, the documents presented. Whatever the legal outcome, she had defended herself with dignity rather than surrendering to false accusations. "You did very well in there," Margot commended. Clear, factual, emotionally composed. Judges appreciate witnesses who stick to verifiable information without embellishment. "Thank you," Martha replied, "for everything." As Margot departed to handle another appointment, Martha lingered on the courthouse steps, autumn sunlight warming her face despite the cool breeze. She hadn't noticed James approaching until he stood beside her, hands shoved into his coat pockets, expression unreadable. "I didn't know," he said after a moment. "About the personal expenses from the boutique account, the spa trips and jewelry. Rebecca told me those were business costs for client entertaining." The admission hung between them, inadequate yet significant, the first acknowledgement that perhaps Martha's concerns hadn't been entirely unreasonable. "There's a lot you didn't know," Martha replied, neither accusatory nor comforting, simply stating fact. "Why didn't you tell me?" A hint of childish petulance colored the question, as if Martha had been responsible for his willful blindness. "Would you have believed me over Rebecca?" Martha countered gently. "When have you ever taken my side when she was involved?" James had no answer, his gaze dropping to the courthouse steps. "This lawsuit was her idea. Her attorney said we had a strong case based on the timing of the agreement." "And you went along with it," Martha observed, "even though you knew I'd been supporting the boutique for years before that. Even though you personally asked me for many of those loans." "I didn't think it would go this far," James defended weakly. "I thought you'd settle, rather than have family business aired in court." The calculation revealed more than James perhaps intended, the expectation that Martha would once again sacrifice her interests to avoid conflict, that her desire for family harmony would outweigh her need for justice. It was the same assumption that had governed their relationship for years, now laid bare in its manipulative essence. "There's something you need to understand, James," Martha said, meeting her son's gaze directly. "I will always love you, but I will never again allow myself to be used, whether financially or emotionally. Not by you, not by Rebecca, not by anyone." James flinched at the word used, the characterization too accurate for comfort. "That's not what we were doing." "It is exactly what you were doing," Martha corrected without rancor. "And I participated willingly for a long time because I wanted to be needed to be included in your life. But that's not a healthy dynamic for any of us." Before James could respond, Rebecca emerged from the courthouse, spotting them with visible displeasure. "James, we need to go," she called pointedly, ignoring Martha's presence. "The attorney wants to discuss next steps." James hesitated, caught between his wife's summons and the unfinished conversation with his mother. "I should go," he decided, predictably retreating to the familiar pattern of prioritizing Rebecca's demands. "I'll call you later." Martha watched them depart, Rebecca's arm linked possessively through James's, as she led him toward the parking garage, already discussing strategy for appeal, should the ruling not favor them. The scene crystallized everything Martha had been slowly accepting over recent months. Her son was not currently capable of the relationship she deserved, too entangled in Rebecca's narrative and priorities to establish healthy boundaries or independent judgment. 3 days later, Judge Simmons issued her ruling, a decisive rejection of Rebecca's petition, affirming the validity of the partnership agreement based on overwhelming documentary evidence of long-term financial support, inconsistent with claims of sudden coercion. The judgment noted specifically that the plaintiff's characterization of events contradicts contemporaneous written communications and financial records, and that claims of undue influence are unsupported by witness testimony and inconsistent with the plaintiff's own documented requests for Mrs. Gardner's financial involvement. Martha received the news from Margot with quiet satisfaction rather than triumph. Vindication in court couldn't heal the family breach the lawsuit had widened, but it protected her from further financial exploitation and established legal recognition of her legitimate business interest in the boutique. "What happens now?" Martha asked Margot during their follow-up call. "With the boutique partnership, legally everything remains as established in the original agreement," Margot explained. You retain 49% ownership with the rights and responsibilities outlined therein. Practically speaking, given the contentious relationship, I'd recommend minimal direct involvement beyond receiving financial reports and exercising approval rights for major decisions. The advice aligned with Martha's own inclination. Fighting for daily operational input would be draining and ultimately counterproductive, given Rebecca's resistance. Better to maintain appropriate financial oversight while investing her energy in more fulfilling pursuits: her consulting work, the financial literacy workshops, her developing artistic practice, and the community connections that offered genuine reciprocity. A week passed with no communication from James or Rebecca beyond a terse email from their attorney acknowledging the ruling and confirming the partnership agreement's continued validity. Martha maintained her scheduled hours at the boutique, focusing on financial oversight rather than operational decisions, professionally cordial during the few occasions when she and Rebecca occupied the same space. The crisp vitality of autumn deepened toward winter trees, releasing their final leaves as November progressed. Martha expanded her garden beds for spring planting, laying mulch to protect the soil through coming frosts. She completed a series of 6 lake harmony paintings, each capturing different light conditions and seasonal aspects. Susan displayed 2 in the cafe, resulting in Martha's first art sale when a regular customer offered $200 for her rendering of autumn reflections on still water. Carol convinced Martha to join her for a weekend artist's retreat in the Berkshires, 2 days of watercolor instruction and nature walks that left Martha simultaneously exhausted and invigorated. She returned with new techniques to explore and a commitment to weekly painting sessions with 3 women she'd met during the retreat. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving, Martha's workshop on holiday financial management for seniors attracted its largest attendance, yet 37 participants ranging from recently retired professionals to widows navigating their first holiday seasons alone. The session combined practical advice on avoiding seasonal overspending with emotional strategies for managing family financial expectations. Remember, Martha advised the group, gift giving should express love, not obligation. Your presence is more valuable than presents, and anyone who measures your worth by the price tag of your gifts doesn't understand your true value. After the workshop, Martha lingered at the community center, helping stack chairs and collecting evaluation forms from participants. A woman about Martha's age approached silver-streaked auburn hair, framing a face lined with experience rather than hardship. "That bit about worth not being measured by gift price tags really hit home," she commented, introducing herself as Elizabeth. "My daughter-in-law has champagne expectations on my beer budget. Every Christmas I end up spending more than I should because I'm afraid of disappointing her." "I understand completely," Martha acknowledged, recognizing her former pattern in Elizabeth's situation. "It's hard to establish boundaries when you fear rejection." Their conversation continued over coffee at a nearby diner, shared experiences creating immediate connection. Elizabeth had retired from teaching 3 years earlier, her husband's death following shortly after leaving her navigating widowhood and retirement simultaneously. Her son and daughter-in-law lived nearby with twin daughters. Elizabeth's relationship with them complicated by financial expectations she struggled to manage. "They assume I'm financially comfortable because my husband had good life insurance," Elizabeth explained. "What they don't understand is that I'm budgeting for potentially 30 more years of expenses without additional income. If I spend as freely as they expect, I'll outlive my savings." Martha nodded, recognizing the familiar dynamic. "Have you discussed your financial realities with them?" "I've tried," Elizabeth sighed. "They listen politely, then suggest I live a little, because you can't take it with you, as if planning for my future security is somehow selfish." The conversation continued for over an hour, spanning financial concerns, the complex emotions of grandparenting without undermining parental authority, and the unexpected challenges and freedoms of reconstructing identity after major life transitions. When they finally parted, they exchanged contact information with plans to meet again after the holidays. Walking to her car afterward, Martha reflected on how differently this interaction had unfolded compared to her family relationships. The mutual respect, the absence of hidden agendas or manipulative undertones, the genuine exchange of experience without judgment, all created a foundation for potential friendship unencumbered by the painful patterns that characterized her connections with James and Rebecca. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Martha received a text from James. "Mom, we miss you. Will you join us for Thanksgiving dinner, 3 p.m. Thursday?" The invitation triggered complex emotions, Hope that perhaps the court case had prompted reflection suspicion about the sudden reconciliatory gesture, yearning for family connection, despite everything that had transpired. Martha read and reread the brief message, searching for clues to intention beyond the surface words. She had already accepted Susan's invitation to join the cafe's annual Thanksgiving for Independent Spirits, an informal gathering for those without traditional family celebrations. The prospect of trading that relaxed, genuine camaraderie for potential tension with Rebecca seemed unwise, yet the pull of connection with James and Jacob remained powerful. After considerable reflection, Martha composed her response. "Thank you for the invitation. I've already made plans for Thursday, but I'd welcome a chance to see you and Jacob soon. Perhaps we could meet for lunch this weekend." James's reply came hours later. "Rebecca thinks it would be better if we're all together as a family. Can't you change your plans? It's Thanksgiving." The subtle guilt tactic was so familiar, Martha almost smiled the implication that her existing commitment was less important, that real family trumped any other connection, regardless of how those family members had treated her. In the past, she would have capitulated immediately, canceling other plans to accommodate their preferences, regardless of personal cost. "I'm sorry I can't change my commitment," Martha replied firmly. "My offer for weekend lunch stands. Let me know if that works for you and Jacob." No response followed the silence, communicating James's displeasure more clearly than words. Martha felt the expected twinge of guilt, the programmed response to prioritizing her own boundaries over others' expectations. But beneath it, a stronger current of self-respect affirmed her decision. Thanksgiving with Susan's community would offer genuine connection without manipulation, celebration without underlying tension. It was the healthier choice, even if not the easier one. On Thanksgiving morning, Martha woke early brewing coffee as dawn light filtered through her kitchen windows. She prepared her contribution to Susan's gathering roasted root vegetables with rosemary and thyme from her own garden while listening to classical music rather than the news. The simple domestic activity grounded her in present contentment rather than absent relationships' appreciation for what was rather than longing for what wasn't. Her phone chimed with a text as she was transferring the vegetables to a serving dish. Jacob's name appeared on the screen. "Happy Thanksgiving, Grandma. I miss your pecan pie." Martha smiled at the unexpected connection warmth spreading through her chest at this small bridge across the family divide. "Happy Thanksgiving, Jacob. I miss you too. The pie recipe is yours whenever you want to try making it yourself." "Maybe we could make it together sometime," came the immediate response. "I'd love that." Martha replied this simple exchange with her grandson, offering more genuine connection than any formal family dinner constrained by Rebecca's orchestration and James's divided loyalties. Susan's Thanksgiving gathering unfolded exactly as promised, relaxed, welcoming, devoid of the performative perfection that characterized holidays with Rebecca. 23 people crowded around mismatched tables pushed together in the cafe's main room, ages ranging from Susan's 24-year-old nephew to Thomas Chen's 90-year-old mother visiting from San Francisco. The food reflected this diversity: traditional turkey and stuffing alongside dishes representing various cultural heritages and dietary preferences. Martha found herself seated between Diane Miller and a retired literature professor named Robert Conversation, flowing easily between food appreciation, local politics, and books recently enjoyed. No one probed for painful family histories or reasons for attending an alternative Thanksgiving. The shared understanding that holidays could be complicated required no explanation or justification. Midway through the meal, Martha's phone vibrated with an incoming call, James. She excused herself to answer in the cafe's quiet back hallway. "Happy Thanksgiving," she offered, genuine despite everything. "You should be here," James replied without preamble, accusation threading through his tone. "Jacob keeps asking why Grandma isn't coming." The emotional manipulation was so transparent, Martha could almost admire its simplicity, invoking Jacob to induce maximum guilt. "I explained in my text that I had prior commitments," she reminded him gently, "and I offered to meet this weekend instead." "It's Thanksgiving," James persisted, as if the holiday itself negated any other consideration. "Family should be together." "Families should treat each other with respect and consideration," Martha countered, "which includes respecting existing plans rather than expecting last-minute changes." The silence that followed revealed James's frustration with this unfamiliar boundary. In their previous dynamic, Martha would have immediately rearranged her life to accommodate his expectations regardless of inconvenience or personal cost. "Rebecca made your favorite cranberry relish." He tried again, offering this small gesture as evidence of goodwill that should override Martha's decision. That was thoughtful of her, Martha acknowledged. Please thank her for me and enjoy your celebration. I should get back to my friends now. Friends? James echoed the word, carrying unmistakable dismissal, as if connections outside family were inherently less significant. I didn't know you had plans with friends. The revelation in his tone genuine surprise that Martha had relationships beyond their family circle crystallized the fundamental imbalance that had characterized their interactions for years. James had never considered Martha's life beyond her role as mother, and grandmother had never imagined her having meaningful connections or commitments that didn't revolve around his family's needs and schedule. There's a lot you don't know about my life, James, Martha observed without recrimination. I've changed since the lawsuit. Since before then, really. I'm building a different kind of life now. Different how? Wariness colored the question as if Martha's personal growth somehow threatened his security. More balanced, she explained. With relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. With pursuits that bring me joy and meaning beyond family caretaking. With boundaries that protect my financial and emotional well-being. Sounds selfish, James muttered, reverting to the familiar accusation when Martha prioritized her needs alongside others. Sounds healthy, Martha corrected gently. And it's available to all of us if we're willing to relate differently. That's what my offer for lunch this weekend represents, a step toward a healthier relationship where we can enjoy each other's company without underlying agendas or expectations. James had no immediate response, the possibility of reconstructing their relationship on more equal footing apparently requiring more consideration than a holiday phone call allowed. I should go, he said finally. The turkey's getting cold. Enjoy your dinner, Martha replied. Give Jacob my love. Returning to Susan's gathering, Martha slipped back into her seat, the warmth of genuine community enveloping her after the chilly exchange with James. Robert passed the sweet potato casserole while continuing his story about a disastrous faculty meeting, including Martha in the conversation, without missing a beat. Later, as dessert was being served, an impressive array of pies, cakes, and cookies contributed by various attendees, Susan settled into the chair beside Martha. Everything okay? You seemed a bit distracted after that phone call. Family complexities, Martha acknowledged. My son's disappointed I'm not at his Thanksgiving table. Susan nodded understanding without requiring details. Holidays have a special talent for magnifying family expectations, don't they? As if turkey somehow erases all boundary violations and past hurts. The observation was so perfectly aligned with Martha's experience that she laughed despite herself. Exactly, apparently, cranberry relish should override both prior commitments and months of legal conflict. Yet here you are choosing something different, Susan noted, raising her coffee cup in a small toast. That takes courage. Or stubbornness, Martha suggested wryly. Same quality, different application, Susan countered with a smile. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Our gathering is richer for your presence. The simple acknowledgement that Martha added value simply by being present, not by providing financial support or practical assistance, touched a place deep within that had been starved for such recognition. Here, among people who had known her less than a year, Martha felt more genuinely seen and appreciated than in the family relationships she had nurtured for decades. As the gathering gradually dispersed, guests departing with leftover containers and warm embraces, Martha helped with cleanup, alongside several others who had volunteered to stay. The cooperative activity, washing dishes, storing leftovers, rearranging tables, created a comfortable rhythm of shared purpose without hierarchy or resentment. By the time Martha departed, twilight had settled over the town holiday lights glowing in windows and along storefronts. She drove home with a contentment that had nothing to do with traditional family obligations and everything to do with authentic connection. At home, Martha made a cup of tea and settled into her favorite reading chair, reflecting on the day's contrast between James's expectation of her immediate availability and the easy acceptance she'd experienced among Susan's gathering. The fundamental difference wasn't in the people themselves, but in the nature of the relationships, one based on entitlement and obligation, the others on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. Her phone chimed with a text message from Jacob. Dinner was weird without you. Dad and Mom had a fight after he talked to you. Can I still come make pie sometime? The message illuminated the complicated position Jacob occupied, 12 years old and already navigating the emotional currents between adults who ostensibly loved each other but couldn't interact without conflict. Martha's heart ached for her grandson caught in dynamics not of his creation, yet inevitably affected by their fallout. "Absolutely," she texted back. "Pecan pie partnership is always available no matter what's happening between the grown-ups. I love you, Jacob." "Love you too," came the immediate response, followed by a second message. "Mom's making Dad turn in his phone for Thanksgiving family time, so I have to go. But I mean it about the pie." Martha smiled at her grandson's persistence, recognizing in it a resilience that would serve him well, navigating his parents' complicated relationship patterns. Despite everything, Jacob maintained his connection to her, asserting his right to a relationship independent of the adult conflicts swirling around him. Setting her phone aside, Martha picked up her watercolor supplies, inspired to capture the evening's particular quality of light, the warm glow of homes against deepening blue twilight, holiday decorations creating pools of color in the gathering darkness. As she mixed pigments and tested brushstrokes, Martha reflected on the day's fundamental lesson: family could be defined by more than blood relation or legal connection. Family could be chosen created through mutual respect and genuine care, rather than obligation or shared DNA. The painting took shape beneath her brush, not a technically perfect representation, but an emotionally honest one, conveying the contrast between external darkness and interior warmth. The beauty of light emerging from shadow. Martha worked until her eyes grew tired, setting the painting aside to dry overnight. Tomorrow she would call Jacob to arrange their pie-making session, perhaps suggesting they use Susan's cafe kitchen where they could work without Rebecca's hovering presence or James's divided loyalties. She would attend her watercolor group and continue planning the December financial workshops. She would live fully in the life she was creating, not as replacement for family connection, but as expansion beyond its limitations. Martha Gardner at 67 was not the same woman who had silently funded her son's lifestyle and endured her daughter-in-law's dismissal. She had emerged from that crucible with clearer boundaries, stronger self-respect, and deeper understanding of her own worth beyond what she could provide for others. The transformation hadn't been easy or without pain, but standing now on the other side of that difficult passage, Martha recognized its necessity. Silence is not absence. Silence is choice. And Martha had chosen finally and irrevocably to break her silence and reclaim her voice in family and community in the quietness of her own heart. Whatever came next with James and Rebecca would unfold on this new foundation, not the shifting sands of financial dependence and emotional manipulation that had characterized their past. Some bridges once burned couldn't be reconstructed exactly as before. But perhaps Martha reflected as she prepared for bed, new connections could be built different in structure, but potentially stronger, designed with the wisdom earned through difficult experience and the courage to prioritize authenticity over easy accommodation. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and opportunities. Tonight, Martha slept peacefully, no longer haunted by others' expectations or her own endless accommodations, finally at home in herself and the life she was choosing one boundary and brushstroke at a time.